I'll just let these guys decide. I mean, it really looks like that. That was just so underrated. I don't think that's very. We're kind of moving out now. Oh, go there. You can take a tree, get to that. There? Yeah, I think it's a good plan. Like, blue, silver. Get back here! In the name of Lumber. It's a nib. You moron. There you go, something like. It won't let me take the weapon! I fucking hate you. It's because if there's a breeze, it's nice enough.
Is this Elden?
Uh, like a sequel to it, basically. Yeah.
Is the one that was basically always the same? Expected and the same.
This one is more like a multiplayer version, so
Yeah. Is it doing this issue?
well, he will in a second.
But this one is a bit more similar to Fortnite.
Yeah, in a way, there's this whole storm cycle that kind of forces you into a middle point, but you're not fighting other players; you're just fighting AI.
And you teaming up with them, or you just
Just randoms. I have no idea who these people are.
but are you playing together?
Uh, well, there's no real form of communication, so it's more like one person decides, "Oh, I want to go here." The rest of us just follow.
Okay, but you do follow.
Yeah,
You lost it.
you're over there.
Like oh,
There's the main guys and all.
getting the right foot.
I'm trying to try something out, but it's not exactly working right now. Well, right now, in this game, base, what I'm trying. Oh, what basically happens is I load up with some like random guys, or I play alone, which is 10 times harder. Uh, I arrive on a randomly generated map, and I have to survive 2 days, in which at the end of 2 days I'll have to fight a boss fight, and then on the
You real day. Yeah, yeah.
game days, not hit 48 hours. Um, but after I beat the second boss, then I fight like the final boss, which if I beat them, I can go on to the next one. And they tend to be really annoying and quite hard. And then there's a bunch of little mini bosses around the map to level up and do things.
If you're not on step 3 of the design,
Yeah.
so
There's different classes in this game, so normally I play a different class, but I've decided to use this one for now. And it's like the little midget girl there. that class can some goes tends to be more slightly ranged, a little more squishy. That's my entire health bar gone.
That was great.
Yeah. Okay. Don't much leave with it. Oh no, it is hard. Oh no, it's not right. It's not dynamic. They're supposed to be bagging out on street. was terrible. Oh my god. This is the worst one yet. My ult doesn't matter anymore. Oh!
checklist. But the world is still full of wonder. We just need a better way to find it. Airbnb experiences. Master ramen with an award-winning chef. Dive into underground jazz with a renowned bassist. Or see Notre Dame with hand. Cheap but historic, by the way. Don't just see a place. Experience it.
The Venator Star Destroyer seemed almost designed for the Rebel Alliance, a massive carrier from a bygone era, which represented the Republic they hoped to restore, and was available if they knew where to look and had a few extra credits to spare. The Alliance was known to use other Colonials era capital ships, like the Providence Cruiser Rebel 1 or the Lucrehulk Tressa, but there are no known instances of them using the Lucrehulk. Why? That's what we'll look at today. Hey guys, this is Eckhart Slatter. Hello and welcome to another lore video. Before we get into things, I just want to remind you guys, if you haven't already, consider following me over at twitch.tv/Eckhart I've had a nightly stream for the past 12 days, and we've played everything from LEGO Star Wars to Jedi Knight to Minecraft to Apex. So if that's something you're interested in, consider following me there. But on topic. To answer the question of why the Rebel Alliance never used Star Destroyers, we have to understand the most important asset, the X-Wing. The X-Wing was a beautiful and incredible fighter, effective against capital ships and other starfighters, well shielded, well armed, maneuverable, and speedy. However, it had two specific advantages, which, when combined, allowed the Rebel Alliance to dominate the Empire despite having a much smaller navy. The first one is obvious: hyperdrive. Unlike TIE fighters, X-Wings did not need to be carried into battle. They could merely jump, perform a mission, then leave. However, there were many ships that could do this. The difference with the X-Wing was that it was actually effective working without a capital ship escort. This is thanks to its unique Fabritech sensors and the augmented specialist pack held in the fighter's nose. Unlike almost every other fighter active in the galaxy at this point, including every single fighter in the Imperial Navy by the Battle of Yavin, this allowed the X-Wing to operate independently of a capital ship, with the sensors doing extra legwork in the areas of navigation, tactics, communication, and targeting. The X-Wing was so effective because the multi-role vessel could enter battle, attack a Star Destroyer before the fighters were able to launch, then retreat. These hit-and-run attacks were almost unstoppable by the Empire early on in the war, and relied totally on speed. Starfighter squadrons packing enough damage to disable a capital ship would enter the battlefield, avoid fire, unleash their ordnance, and simply leave. And something like a carrier would not benefit the Alliance in this mission type. If anything, it would actually remove their ability to run hit-bait attacks, as the Alliance would lose this running advantage associated with non-competitive Alliance fighters. As an example, during the first attack on the Death Star, the Alliance brought with them a Lucrehulk known as the Fortress, which was very quickly destroyed by the Death Star's super laser. However, what's more, by the time the Alliance had launched their attack squadrons, the Empire had organized their defenses and were able to cut apart the attackers with very little losses. Of course, most Imperial fleets wouldn't have access to a super weapon, but they still had overwhelming cruiser level firepower, such that Alliance ships would be basically useless. This reality dictated the Alliance starfighter strategy created by Yondu Donna. Before Dodonna took over the reins of Alliance starfighter management, the rebels had tried collecting territory and turtling behind sector navies camouflaged in shields, but this proved to be untenable. Dodonna recognized the advantage of hyperspace-capable X-Wings and that they were key to undermining the Empire and winning the air battles, and the Alliance did so, disrupting supply lines and disabling bases. But this wasn't something they only did sometimes. The Alliance's main offensive thrusts, in fact, were powered by the starfighters, and as a stateless government, the Alliance could more or less stay mobile, avoiding the need for large capital ships. But, as I alluded to, although the Navy was starfighter-based, it didn't have carriers. Carriers didn't fit the hit-and-strike mission profile, and fighters usually either jumped in on their own after refueling and rebuilding the system, or were sometimes covertly transported in disguised fighters. Obviously, the Venator doesn't fit here, and the fact that it was specialized towards a sort of obsolete function meant that the Alliance probably wasn't seeing it out, but we'll get back to it. Eventually, military doctrine did shift, and the Alliance, under the leadership of Mon Mothma, did start to collect capital ships and beef up their military. At this point, we see the introduction of the Number 1 and other Syrians cavalry ships. Had the battle at Deep Space Mesh not occurred, it's possible that some Venators would have entered during the service, but that battle saw the Alliance's fleet absolutely torn apart by the Empire in nearly devastating loss. Thankfully, the Alliance was saved by the Mon Calamari, who had previously ceded from the Empire but now were in outright defiance and revolting Palpatine. They graciously supplied new cruisers to the Alliance Navy, which became the cruiser backbone of almost every rebel fleet. And this is specifically where we can look at why the Alliance chose other capital ships instead of Venators. As I explained, we know that the Empire simply got rid of some of their prior Venators, so it certainly makes sense that if the Alliance really wanted some of the Star Destroyers, they could have secured some. However, the Mon Calamari cruisers, which they did go with, were all around better ships. Although the Venator was an exceptional carrier, the rebels did not need specialized carrier vessels just because of how their starfighter wings worked. MC-80s and similar vessels were superior in nearly every other aspect, especially survivability, while still taking some of the load from carrying if necessary. It's also likely that the Alliance, which had been seriously hurt at the Battle of Deep Space Mesh, would have also struggled to secure Venators, at least from that point moving forward, and it would have been difficult to justify when they were getting non-combat cruisers for free. What's more, Venators required a lot of crew while providing a specialized need that could be met elsewhere, as I've been hammering on for this video. I think there's a similar reason why Lucre hulks, besides for the Fort Tressa, would have been used for naval bases rather than battleships. However, even if the starfighters of the Alliance were not hyperspace capable, I don't think the Venator would have made a good choice. Venators carry hundreds of fighters, and to be honest, most of that space would be wasted. It's much more efficient to go for a ship which would tightly pack assets while using the extra space for shielding or weaponry. If you compare the Venator with, say, the Providence, the latter is more heavily configurable. It has better weaponry and probably defenses, and it has a more reasonable hangar size. What's more, large capital ships were fairly rare, and the Alliance preferred instead to rely on smaller corvettes, frigates, and gunships. But that has all just been my opinion. Does my theory make sense? Do you think the Rebel Alliance actually did use Venators and perhaps a roundabout in the canon? Let me know all that down below. A lot of the information from today's video came from the Essential Guide to Warfare. I'll include a non-affiliate link down in the description. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Just a reminder again, I will likely be streaming on Twitch tonight if the past 12 days.
Cat food. Arriving today with Prime. That's off your mind. So now you can worry about something.
Amidst the cries and groans of the mass of men, Titus Labienus struggles to hold back the ferocious assault. After 6 years of war, all of Gaul seemed ranged against them. Here at Alesia, there would be victory or death. Yet as thoughts of the latter loomed larger in his thoughts, a great cheer erupted. The scarlet cloak of one man seemed to breathe new vigor into the hearts and sword arms of the men. The eyes of the nearest barbarians widen as the men chant the name of Gaius Julius Caesar. Before we dive in, a quick word about our sponsor, NordVPN. I use NordVPN all the time, whether I'm at protect up to 10 different devices. Britain, he failed to bring the land and peoples there firmly under Rome's dominion. Certainly wowed. 54 BC was a bad year for Gaius Julius Caesar. Though he certainly wowed folks back in Rome with his second campaign into far-flung Britain, he failed to bring the land and peoples there firmly under Rome's dominion. Furthermore, his absence had emboldened the peoples in the newly conquered Gaul to action. Unlike Britain, Caesar had arguably conquered the historically troublesome tribes of Gaul, to the extent that he risked his campaigns into Britain to begin with. However, on his return, a fresh rebellion erupted under Ambiorix. Having successfully lured a legion out of their camp, Caesar's prestige had been dented through the loss of Legia 14 and a further 5 cohorts of green troops under the leadership of Lucius Aurunculeius Cotta and Quintus Titurius Sabinus. To the Gauls, this demonstrated that Caesar was not invulnerable, and though Ambiorix and another attack were ultimately squashed, these events would merely foreshadow a far deadlier crisis to come. Caesar, meanwhile, had stamped out the fires of rebellion for now, yet his quartering of legions in isolated pockets had proved most unwise. The Gauls were far from content under his brutal occupation. To hammer home his own commitment to Gaul's subjugation, Caesar had more than replaced the lost 14th, raising 2 more legions in Cisalpine Gaul, while Pompey lent him Legia I, so that throughout his pacification efforts in 53 BC, Caesar's army had swelled to 10 legions. Still, despite this, Caesar's brutal scouring of resisting tribes had only darkened the resolve of others. His recent public flogging and execution of the Senonian noble Acco sounded alarm bells in other chiefs that such a grim fate could befall any of them, should they displease their new Roman masters. Throughout the winter, secret gatherings took place in secluded woods, the better to scheme how those willing chiefs could throw off the Roman yoke once and for all. Among those present was a young Avernian noble by the name of Vercingetorix. Of course, the name comes down to us today as one of a brief unifier, yet ironically at the time the young Gallic noble may have begun as anything but. Caesar writes that his father Geltulus had attempted to make himself king, something many of the more politically progressive tribes violently rejected, preferring instead to elect magistrates to power. Caesar writes that the son too nursed lofty ambitions of kingship, that Vercingetorix had little to gain from submitting to the status quo is therefore understandable, and when we factor into this his undoubted charisma and intelligence, it's no wonder tribally diverse bands of equally eager men flocked to his banner. Having sworn oaths of mutual support at these meetings, the conspirators were generally agreed that the time to strike would be soon. Vercingetorix and the other Gallic leaders knew that Caesar customarily took his leave of absence around this time, and that his legates and legions would therefore act passively and, with any luck, as ineptly as the ill-fated 14th had against Ambiorix. Caesar's enemies also hoped that his attention would be firmly fixed too on the deteriorating situation in Rome itself. With the gangs of Claudius and Nero at each other's throats, and the former killed in a fight just outside Rome, violence had once again erupted. The consular elections were postponed. Yet, though Caesar indeed watched events in Rome with concern, Vercingetorix and his allies were mistaken if they believed he would not intervene. The first blow was not struck by the Averni, however, but by the Carnutes. Late in the year, Cenabum was assaulted, and its garrison and Roman inhabitants annihilated. In a single stroke, Caesar's army had lost its major grain store under the protection of equestrian Gaius Fufius Geta. The time for secrecy was decidedly over, as news of this disaster made it as far as 160 miles away from Italy. Vercingetorix 2 wasted no time piling in, rousing groups of